I want to thank all of you for taking the time this morning to connect with Jacob and I around 8 key considerations for when you're choosing a backup solution. Before I go ahead and jump into this, just a few quick housekeeping things, and really just one. We're going to try and save about 5 or so minutes at the end here for any questions that you might have. And so if you do have a question that comes up at any point during the presentation, what we'd like for you to do is you can go right down to the bottom where it says Q&A. If you click on that, you'll be able to enter your question right within there. And in entering that, we'll try and save those for the end and get through as many as we can during the Q&A time. So feel free to enter those at any point in time that you actually do have the question. All right, with that, Jacob, we can move to the next slide. So just by way of a quick introduction for us on this side of the house, my name's Logan McCoy, and I'm the Vice President of Services here at CCB Technology. I've been with the company for about 13 years, and more specifically in this role for about 5 years. So I oversee both our professional services team that does a lot of the project implementation for our clients across the nation, and I also oversee our managed services team that's directly responsible for helping to manage our service desk side for our clients that we help support on a 24/7 basis. And then with me as well, I have Jacob Tarowski, who is our Director of Enterprise Architecture. Jacob's been with us for, is it 6 years now, Jacob? Yep, 6 years. And started initially as a systems engineer and has moved his way on up. And so where Jacob really, I'd say, has a major role for us is in helping to kind of see where the market's going and build out those solutions that we believe are good key solutions for our clients to utilize to help advance and further their mission or just their organization themselves. And so Jacob had a major hand actually in some of the things that we're going to be talking about today during our presentation. So before we get into that, just as a way of quick intro as well for the company. So CCB Technology was started 29 years ago, back in 1991. And we were started really with the mission at that point in time to serve the nonprofit community. And we did that by creating a number of varying programs that 40,000 nonprofits, that's how many we've worked with over the course of time, have been able to take advantage of. And that's whether it's Microsoft licensing, Adobe licensing, Dell or Apple hardware, so on and so forth. We created a lot of those nonprofit or charity licensing programs. And so for the first 20 or so years, we functioned as a traditional VAR, if you're in the industry and know that term. But about 10 years or so ago, we actually made the leap into becoming a full managed service provider. And that was really started by our now CEO, Patrick Booth. And so from that point, what we started to do, I'd say initially was offer things primarily around the Microsoft stack because we're a very large Microsoft partner. So Office 365 was a really good segue for us to kind of dip our toes into not just helping our clients procure the hardware and software, but then also implement that. And we did that starting, if you can remember, all the way back to the days of BPOS and then within Office 365. But now it really spans the full gamut. And so we can do pretty much everything within the stack of your environment, right? So if you're looking at the rack from the firewall, the switch infrastructure, your server and core infrastructure from that perspective, storage and backup as we're going to be talking about today, we can do all of that from an implementation and management side. And then we couple that with additional things like help desk services and support. One of the things that I always like to highlight about this is our services team is one of our fastest growing teams within our company. And you can actually see that down by one of the awards that we've won, where within just the past 10 years, we've now become one of the largest 150 managed service providers in the nation. And that award that we get isn't just based on size, it's also based on the quality of service that we deliver. So we love that I believe we've received that award now for the last 4 or 5 years. And so it's definitely something that we love to continue to go after and strive because we believe it helps exemplify what we try to come to work with every day with the heart to serve our clients and to help them achieve what they need to from that side of the house. So let's actually get into what we're going to be talking about today. And before I turn it over to Jacob, I've just got a few key points that I want to highlight to you guys for us of why backup matters. Because a lot of times, especially if you're IT and you're on this webinar right now, you might have a discussion with your C-level or executive team talking about backups. And for them, it might be, I understand it's kind of important, but why does it matter, right? And the analogy that I always like to give in that regard is really around if you ever have a fire in your house, if you ever have something that significant and you have to grab something out of your house, what are you going to go for? And every time you have someone that answers that question, they're going for the things that matter most to them. And oftentimes those are pictures or keepsakes, things that can't be replaced, right? Things that I can't get back this picture. It's all that I have, right? Even with your mobile device, what do you care most about? What's on your phone? It's your contacts, it's your pictures, it's the things that's personal and relevant to you, it's the data. The device itself can be replaced, right? The house itself, as traumatic as that can be replaced. But some of those things, that's it. If that's gone, it's gone, right? And for you as an organization, your data is the same thing. You can replace your servers, you can replace your email server, you can replace your desktops and laptops. Those things can be replaced. What oftentimes can't be replaced is your data. And if that data is gone, whether it's related to your ERP or CRM system, if it's related to your accounting platform, and especially if you have to adhere to compliances, if that data is gone, it's not just a business disruption, it's potentially a legal issue, right? And so in many ways, in looking at why does it matter, you don't have to look any further than why does your own personal data matter, right? And what would that disruption be and that loss if you did end up losing that data to whatever extent that looked like, right? And so a couple key data points that really help highlight this and how significant of I'd say, an issue and situation that this is that within the last year, so within 2019, 42% of organizations experienced a data loss event that resulted in downtime last year. So for those of you on the call here, we would say that if we broke it down, I think we have 33 attendees. So half of you, let's just say around 15 of you, would have experienced some type of data loss. Now, that could have been catastrophic, that could have been just a file, but almost half of you on this call experienced some type of data loss if this data point holds true, right? So it's obviously happening to a fair amount of organizations. Now, this next data point, though, for me is one of the most telling. And this next data point goes on to say that 91% of organizations have a backup solution in place, but 68% of those organizations still lost data. So what that tells me is, and oftentimes this is what we see when we will go into a client's environment, there's something in place. There's some kind of backup solution that was set up 4, 5, 6 years ago, but it's not monitored or maintained. There's not consistent testing or review, right? And so those types of things where are you confident in your backup solution is probably a greater data point to ask to get a sense of saying I have something, but am I confident it's going to do what I need it to do? Because for us, when we go and have those conversations with our clients, that's the key thing that we're finding is the difference. And you can see here, it's incredible to think of the fact that 90%, 91% of organizations have something, but they're still experiencing data loss. And why would that be if they have a backup solution in place? And so what we're going to do now, and I'm going to turn it over to Jacob to go through, is to talk through 8 key considerations that are going to help ensure that you have a successful backup solution in place so that it's not just this set it and forget it, but that it's this finely tuned machine that you know if you have to utilize because it's your insurance policy in that sense, you have the ability to do so and you know what that looks like so that you're not falling into that 68% of those that did have something in place but still lost data. So with that, Jacob, I'm going to turn it over to you to go through those 8 key aspects.
Thanks, Logan. So, as Logan mentioned, a couple of things that we'll talk about here are some key aspects when it comes to evaluating a backup solution and creating an overall successful backup strategy. So, we'll talk through a number of things here, and we'll start with the first one that talks through really knowing what your business is worth. And what we're talking about here is not just the aspect of what it costs to for your operating expenses for your company, but it also on the aspect of lost revenue. So, what does it look like for you, and how much money would you lose if you're down for an hour, a period of a few hours, or even a period of a few days? And so, how does that impact your business? And so, we see people all across the board when we're talking about the couple key aspects and some terms that you'll hear often are your recovery point objectives, time of your last backup to an incident when something happens, data loss, corruption, or things like that. How much are you willing to risk? And then this one is kind of talking specifically about that recovery time objective. How long does it take you to get back up and running after you've had data loss or corruption or malware has come in and encrypted things? And so within that, we have organizations all across the board that vary from what things look like. You might have a nonprofit or organization that helps take in donations and then distribute those out to other places. And so if they go down and their system is down, they might be able to function with a paper intake process or things like that, and then work through getting their systems back online. And they could stand to be down for a few days or possibly even a week. You might have manufacturing organizations that are running machines 24/7 that are controlled by a server infrastructure that if they're down for even an hour, they could have hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost revenue by not being able to generate the products that they're normally creating. So this helps drive us towards what type of backup solution are we looking for? Because there's ones that can back up near continuously and have all sorts of backups happening for financial data and databases. There's ones that can vary then, and you can stagger how often. Maybe you're only backing something up once a week, maybe even once a month, depending on the data. So within here, this helps drive us towards what type of solution are we looking for, and then within that solution, what are we looking to actually protect? And so that drives us towards our next point then of just understanding what's critical within your organization. And so it's the concept of categorizing our data. And so some data is going to be much more important to your organization than others. So financial data, maybe personnel records or other things like that. Other things, Word documents or things like that, might not be as critical. And so when we talk about what we're looking at here, identifying those key critical pieces of your organization's data and what servers and processes, right? It's not just data, it's also keeping those machines running. It's one thing to have all the files backed up from your file server. It's another thing to actually have that server in a state that if something happens, you can get the server back online and have the data be accessible again and not just have the data sitting there in a state that you can't do anything with. So being able to categorize what your data looks like, what your operations look like, helps point towards what you're backing up, how frequently you're backing up, and it drives us towards the questions we always ask of, how often do you want to back this up? What type of retention do you need? Do you have compliances, HIPAA compliances, or things like that, where you might need the data for 7 years, or sometimes longer, depending on what your vertical you're in? And so within those cases, knowing what's critical to your business really allows you to hone in on what you're backing up, how you're backing it up, and all of those type of things. And so between knowing those two type of things points us in a direction then of what are we actually going to do with this? How are we looking at for our overall backup strategy? And so part of what this means for things is that backup is a really interesting piece of an overall larger strategy for business continuity. And so oftentimes it's an interesting dynamic because on the technical side, we can go implement whatever it might be. So I need something backed up, every few minutes from a database transaction side. I need this backed up daily, weekly. Hey, I only need this once a month, that sort of thing. The technical aspects are there for all of those. And in most cases, just about any solution out there can do that. The difference, though, is that in many cases, the business continuity is what's driving the technical aspect of it. And so those decisions come from executives, C-level, other type of people that usually aren't your technical resources. I don't necessarily know from a complete organization standpoint what it would take for us in that first question we talked about of what does it look like if we're down for an hour? What does it look like if we're down for a day? I can't answer those. Those come from our higher executives and Patrick and our VPs to drive what does this look like. And so this idea then for an overall backup strategy needs to account for all sorts of pieces in regards to what our data looks like. And so a great example here is in the idea of an overall strategy. It's one thing to have your data, it's another to be able to access it. And so when we talk about what we're doing here, when we recover something from a backup. So take an example now, times are a little bit different because we're all remote, but in the aspect of if something happened at your location and your data was to be wiped out, there was a disaster, large power failure, fire, tornado, you name it. If something happens there and your building is gone, what does it look like for you to get your data back? If I can get your data back within a few hours, great. But if there's nowhere for your people to be to access that data, what good does it do for you? So it's this idea that we have a backup platform or solution or a piece of software that's doing something for us, but we need to account for an overall larger strategy and ask some of the questions then that help drive what we're doing with that of how often do we back it up? How long do we retain it for? Where do we need to be able to recover it to in place other locations? It also is part then of when we talk about business continuity that things that tie back into a backup solution are things to consider that might only exist as hard copies. So, do you have contracts, leases, other types of paperwork, HR type files that might only exist as a hard copy in a filing cabinet somewhere? And what does that look like? And so we can have the best software in the world, but if we don't have that data protected, we might be really hurt if something happens to our building. And so those are the type of things to talk about then. Does your backup solution have a way for you to possibly scan documents in and protect those type of things? And so it's this idea that we have to kind of start from the higher level and say, what are we protecting and why? To then drill down into what we're going to make the software do in order to go the direction that we need to. And so within that as well, you'll hear very often the aspect of backup and disaster recovery, and they're often blurred together very often when you hear kind of talks and information about what's going on. And so one of the points that we always like to emphasize is the separation of backup from disaster recovery and really that disaster recovery plan. And there's a few key aspects here. Backups are certainly a piece of disaster recovery, but they can't replace it. And so when we're talking about disaster recovery, we're talking about a number of things. It's often associated with spinning up server workloads. If something goes down, my disaster recovery is to spin that up in a co-location, it's to spin that up in Azure or to spin that up in AWS and have that type of capability. But it can also just relate to recovering data. You have an incident that happens, malicious software, virus, accidental deletion. You have something that happens, and your recovery plan then is what do I do to recover that? So it's both overarching of getting workloads back up and running, which could include spinning up somewhere else, but it can also stretch down as simple as, hey, I need to go restore this directory. And so when we're talking about it, backups can't replace that planning piece of what happens. You put backup software in place, you point it at all the things that you want to do, and then you decide how frequently you do that and how long you retain that data for. But the most important part then is to say, okay, if something happens, how do we go recover that? And the worst place you want to be in is testing your backups at the point in time that you need to recover data, right? You always want to test before you need to actually go in and recover something. And so part of that disaster recovery plan is to account for when you need to test things, how frequently you want to test things. And again, back to categorizing your data, there might be things that you test more frequently than others. And so this idea is that backups are a small piece of that, that is that overarching plan that you need to work through of how you're going to keep your organization up and running if something happens. Another key aspect that we often look at here is ensuring that your backup solution can scale with what you're doing. And so we work with a number of organizations that have a pretty static data footprint. They have files and folders and things out there, and it's pretty well kind of the same. Maybe there's a little bit of fluctuation as they continue to go on in business, but they're relatively static. We have other organizations that have great amounts of data. They work with either databases or multimedia or things like that. And so they start with one data footprint, and as they do projects, they grow exponentially with that. So, in general, data growth across all industries is just exponentially growing. And so what we're seeing with that is it's very rare that we go back and clean up a file server. It's very rare that we go back and clean up what's on our flash drive or things like that. The general idea is we put data somewhere and it's just going to be there and it just keeps growing. Same thing is true for your phone. It's rare that we go back and delete a bunch of things from our phone, other than in the event when we run out of space. I don't have room to go take the pictures I want for whatever event you might be at. And so within that, we see a lot of things from a backup strategy where the average lifespan of a backup solution before you would maybe look to replace it with something else that's a better fit. There's major upgrades or updates within whatever software package you're using. The average lifespan is around 5 years. And so within that, you need to account for, okay, if I'm backing something up now and it does well now, what does my data footprint look like in 2, 3, 4 years from now? And does this solution still work for that and plan for that? And so the worst thing that you want to do is put something in now and 2 years from now have to go replace that with something else. A key aspect we talk about with backups all the time is definitely that compliance piece. And so if you need to hold on to that data, most backup solutions don't allow you to take it from solution A and move it into solution B, which means that if you need something for a 5 year period or a 7 year period and you switch backup solutions in the middle of that retention period, you have to hold on to that old solution until all of that data ages out. So it's important to make sure that you have something encompassing enough to grow with you as you continue to grow. And so in that aspect of holistic as possible, it's kind of summarizing a lot of that stuff here that says, okay, we need to make sure that you have a solution that meets your needs. So, have we categorized your data? How frequently do you need to back it up? Where do you need to back it up? Do you need it off prem? Following this idea of the 3-2-1 rule that you'll hear often in backups is 3 copies of your data on 2 different types of media, with at least one of them being offsite. And so when we look at different backup strategies, we want to make sure that we're backing up all the things that we need to back up. So can we do local file servers? Can we do local databases? Can we do your accounting package? If you're a 365 user, is it important for you to be able to back up your users' OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams and aspects there without having to bring in yet another solution? So when we're talking about holistic here, we're making sure that it covers all of the things that you need to protect, and it does all of the key things that you need to say, I have a local copy for quick retention, quick recovery. I have a place that I can do for long-term retention. It grabs all those sources and things there. So it's kind of a summary of all of those pieces to make sure that we say, okay, we've talked about all this other stuff. Backup solution then is able to cover all of those. And so another piece key in the industry right now is security. And so it's the type of questions that we say cloud solutions are great. Do you know where your data is stored? Do you know if third parties have access to it? Do you know if your data is encrypted at rest as well as in transit? So, backup solutions in the past, or just data transfer in general in the past, when you were within your network environment, you weren't leaving your network. You were staying within your environment and moving from somewhere on a file server over to a machine, and you never crossed your perimeter. You never crossed your firewall. Within that, for us, you didn't necessarily have to worry about somebody directly snooping on some of that data. A lot of these solutions now, when they're cloud based, you're leaving your environment and moving to a cloud location. And so, is it encrypted in transit? That's very important, because if it's not, there are key pieces of information that you might lose that might be damaging to your reputation. It might be in violation of compliance, and it might also then be things that could damage your company from an intellectual property standpoint and things like that. And so, a big piece of all of that too is that so many people that we see and clients that we work with spend a lot of money up front to get a backup solution in place, and a lot of times they are set up correctly. But it's this aspect of it's set up then from a set it and forget it type mentality. And so many of these solutions really need to be maintained. And you need to make sure that you're constantly reviewing what's being backed up. Do you have alerting in place for failed backup jobs so you can see when something happens and jump in and remediate? Is part of your disaster recovery strategy and your plan to go back in and review all of those? As we mentioned before, are you conducting tests to restore your data and making sure that you're not sitting at a point where, oh, my CEO lost all these files, I need to go recover them. I've never looked at that before. How does this data look? Is it there? Will I be able to go recover it? And also developing how long that takes. So those recovery time objectives we said in the beginning of, I had an incident, something happened, malware encrypted some files, and I need to be back up within 2 hours so that I'm not losing revenue. Have you tested that? Do you know what that looks like? And so within that, right, monitoring it, reviewing it, testing, and repeating. How often are you doing that? What parts of that are critical that you're making sure that you're reviewing those on a regular basis to make sure that your backup strategy is doing everything that you need it to do? So within that, we have those 8 key pieces there of different parts of assessing your information, looking at what's there, developing a granular strategy that says, I need this backed up, daily. I need this backed up hourly. Hey, you know what? This stuff is weekly at best, if not longer. So within that, those are all those key things that you can start looking at a solution to then evaluate. Is it secure? How am I backing it up? What am I doing to test? And so within that, I'll turn it back over to Logan here about how can CCP help with that? So we've talked about all those different things. What do we do then to actually make sure that you have a robust backup strategy in place?
Thanks, Jacob, and great job. And he's hitting the nail right on the head with that, because in regards to everything Jacob's just talked through, it's a lot, right? And for those of you on the call, you could be the business owner, CEO, and you're more focused on running your business. Backups matter, but this isn't something you can be giving your time to every single day, right? Even if you're IT, obviously even more so, this is a part of your job duties and responsibilities. But do you have the capabilities and the capacity to do this right now to the degree that you know it should be done? Right? Because as what we're seeing in the marketplace is a lot of people that are internal IT, they're getting pulled more and more into those strategic type discussions because technology is becoming more and more relevant. I just did a video yesterday and I had mentioned the fact that I don't think we could do what we do. In fact, I know we couldn't from a delivering the services we need to without the technology that we need to do it. And it's the same thing for many of you, right? From the IT side, you're getting pulled into those because technology is needed for the organization to accomplish whatever they need to, hitting a new objective and sales goal, meeting a need in a local community, whatever that might be, right? And so there's three ways I'll go through really quickly here about ways that we can help you in that regard. And the first one is just around general consulting and implementation services. As we go through the rest of it here, you're going to see there's a specific offering that we have that we want to talk with you about. But even beyond that, if you're like, look, I just kind of want you guys to come in and take a look at my backups. I want to know, do I have a good solution in place? Am I following some of these best practices that Jacob has talked about? A great place to start is in overall consulting services for us to get a sense of this is what you have. These are some things that are great about it. These are some things you probably want to take a look at and provide you recommendations for what that looks like, right? And that doesn't just have to be within our own solution. We can do that within a number of different solutions because foundationally, how that sits and remains is the most important thing. The solution then just gets built on top of that, right? The next one though is really around the specific solution that we've built out. And we just built it out in a sense within this past year because we've been offering backups in a number of different ways to our clients, but we ourselves wanted to be able to provide a holistic offering that was, I would say, effective and easy for us to manage, but was the right fit and solution for our clients because we had tried so many different ones. It was great in this sense for an enterprise, but not great for an SMB. It was great in the sense for an SMB, but not with these types of needs, right? And so we did a lot of testing across a number of different platforms this year to then use those solutions to build out our backup as a service offering. And so there's a number of different ways that we can offer that. It's all pretty much done on a monthly and on a consumption basis, right? But you can essentially do that where if you say, I just want the solution and I want you to set that solution up for me, but then I'll manage it from that standpoint. I'm just then utilizing you guys to continue to procure the necessary licensing to do that. We can easily do that. We can also do backup as a service just fully as a standalone, which just means that in that case, what we're doing is we can set up the solution, provide all the licensing that's needed for it, and then manage just your backups. We don't have to necessarily manage the rest of your environment. We can look at focusing on managing just your backups and doing that from a monthly perspective. And on the next slide, I'll show you what that looks like. But the last way is we've actually integrated our backup as a service offering with our overall managed service offering. So if you're on this call and you're a current managed client or thinking about becoming a managed client, we can roll this offering actually into your current managed platform that we're doing with you or one that you're looking to do. So if you're doing network and server management, if we're doing Helpdesk, we can roll this solution into that as well. And so if Jacob, you want to jump into the next slide here, what I'll talk about in this regard is what is a part of the backup as a service solution. And we have this broken down in three different editions here. And I won't go through each of the line items because just for sake of time. But in the regard of what you can see there and what's built out within those, more or less how they break down is from a basic offering, what we're doing is monitoring your cloud backup jobs. If we're pushing those workloads to a local on-site repository, helping to facilitate with that as well. But if there's anything from an on-site remediation that needs to occur, a testing and a restore of those backup jobs, remediating failed backup jobs that are happening locally, not within the cloud, those things aren't a part of basic, right? Now, when you move to standard, that's where we then do start to include full server management because that allows us to then do the remediation of failed backup jobs, whether they're happening in the cloud or they're happening locally, right? And they could be happening locally because of something on the server or because of something on that local storage repository. So we take it up another step further from a standard aspect as well to offer a few more features within that. And then within our premium offering, what we're looking to do is kind of throw everything in the kitchen sink at you when it comes to backups. And so in that regard, it includes everything that basic and standard have, but then also what's a part of that is what we would say a test restore of backed up data. So that's where on like a semi-annual or annual basis, we're actually going in and doing a restore that's part of what you're already paying for to make sure that we're hitting those recovery time objectives and things of that nature. But then as well, it also includes the recovery services. And there's more details of what that means. But if you do actually have an incident, then what we're looking to do from that perspective is come in and actually help restore whatever might be needed, a full VM or just a file from that regard. And then we also offer Microsoft 365 backup as a service. And this is a great thing that I would definitely say if you're not doing anything within Office 365 right now from a backup perspective, I would encourage you to look at that. Because what I would say 9 times out of 10, what you're often seeing is data is lost. It's getting lost within an Office 365 tenant for a client because of accidental deletion or because of other certain things that have happened that because that data was only stored in SharePoint and now it's gone and it's over 30 days and Microsoft can't recover it, that data is gone. It wasn't stored locally, it was just in the cloud, right? And so we also offer a backup solution specifically for Microsoft 365 that's separate from the basic, standard, and premium, if that's also something that you're looking to have within your environment. And so you might be asking, okay, so that's great, kind of what CCB can do and what you offer and all that regards. So what should I do for next steps? And the first thing I would say is if you're really interested in exploring this further, I would encourage you to set up a call with your CCB account manager just to review if this is a right fit for you and if so, what that might look like. And in that as well, if you're new to working with CCB at all, at the end of the slide here, you're actually going to see my contact information. Feel free to take a screenshot or just write that down and reach out.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and share it if you found value, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page so you can stay up to date and current with all the videos we release.